I think they're already seeing relief, and I think that has been evident. The extent to which, we had a 9% inflation for the first time in 40 years. The president has gotten inflation under control. Gas prices are down. And we are hard at work trying to make housing cheaper. I think you'll see ideas from our administration later on a host of fronts.
OMB Director Russ Vought on the economy, leaning hard into the administration's push to reshape the narrative on affordability after a too close for comfort special election in Tennessee this past week. It is time now for our Sunday Group. Fox News contributor Karl Rove, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News Chief National Security Correspondent, and Ronald Reagan Institute Director Roger Zakheim. Thank you for being up extra early with us here on the West Coast. So let's talk about the economy. Obviously, this has been front and center. Axios has this headline that talking about President Trump plotting a travel blitz to tout his economy. White House aides see Trump as the Republican Party's best salesman and its best chance to reverse falling poll numbers for both the president and his party. Karl, how does he turn the message around?
Well, not to say that we have the world's greatest economy and everything is good. We saw this work badly for Joe Biden when he said Bidenomics is working. What the president needs to be doing is talking about the things that he's going to do in the future, acknowledging that tough steps need to be taken in order to make the economy better for all Americans, but acknowledging what he's done, but putting the emphasis on what he's going to do. And he's got some great opportunities. We saw recently the administration was wise, for example, to say we're not going to put a tariff on coffee. Hawaii doesn't generate enough coffee for the rest of the country. We need to import from Brazil and Colombia and other places. Next year, by the fall of next year, the president had better do something about the cost of tennis shoes and school clothes when kids go back to school by lowering the tariffs on the countries from which we buy those things, like Vietnam and Myanmar and Bangladesh.
So we referenced the Tennessee election. It was a blowout win for Republicans by most standards, but that was somewhere President Trump had won by 22 points, so much closer than they would have liked it to be. Politico reports on this top pollster for President Tony Fabrizio. He argued it was a closer race than Republicans would have liked because they weren't talking enough about affordability issues facing voters. He told the group of these Republican Study Committee folks, he said, you got to stay the course and talk about the realities of the economy. Roger.
Well, I think the president's going to have to go back across the country in the McDonald's drive-thrus right here and demonstrating that he understands that it's the cost of the Big Mac that really drives people's votes. Coming up for the midterm, it's going to be a fight. Historically, presidents don't do well in the midterm. But being out there in the country, outside the White House, talking to everyday Americans is something Donald Trump's quite good at. And I think that's the recipe for success here. The geopolitics is also important, too. Here's what I'm talking about. Marjorie Taylor Greene was critical of the president for going out and focusing on foreign affairs too much. But there's a strong nexus between the relationship of the United States and China, for example, and the allies around China that we have, and the American economy. President Trump understands that he needs to translate it for the American people, demonstrating that our strength is actually a key way to bring down the cost of goods, tariffs on our adversaries, not on our friends.
Well, and China have been front and center in conversations here at the Defense Forum because you guys do a survey every year. Again, China was viewed as the top political threat or foreign policy threat. And you also asked this question, how large do you think the U.S. military should be? Because you got to counter all of these different threats. At the top of the list was large enough to win separate wars against China and Russia at the same time. Jen, that's a very heavy lift for our
It is
forces.
a heavy lift, particularly with the current defense budget top line. As we've said, and you heard, some of your guests said, the current budget is half of what the Reagan defense spending was during the buildup. But back to the economy, the significance here is that you're seeing a divide between the president and Speaker Johnson. That could have implications for passing a defense budget in January, which, if we don't get a fiscal year 2026 defense budget, you're going to have a possible continuing resolution, which makes it very difficult to plan for the future for the Pentagon, and that's what we've been discussing here at the Reagan Forum.
Yeah, and Roger, one of the things I talked with Director Vought yesterday about was this shipbuilding issue, and I didn't realize until we started digging into this, by the White House's own numbers, only 0.2 of ships that are built in this country, or in the world, are built by the U.S. 74% of them are built by China. You guys asked about how much we need to focus on this, because China can produce more than 200 ships for every one that we're producing. But it takes a lot of money and long-term investment to turn that kind of number around.
Yeah, to follow up on Jen's point, you need to have sustained funding year over year and address the new priorities that are emerging year over year. Shipbuilding needs to have that discipline. You're not going to bring manufacturing back to the United States if you're stuck in a continuing resolution, flat budgets, half of where we were during the Reagan buildup. We're not going to get there. We heard something from Jack Keane yesterday, General Jack Keane. You know, Americans think they want the greatest military in the world. 87% of Americans say that's what they want. That's what we want to deliver. 1,000 miles outside the coast of China, we are not. We are not. They outdo us there, and that's why we need to invest and have these technologies we can secure so much of what we require for political, military, and economic security.
So speaking of government funding, a big scandal out of Minnesota. This is at the state level. Karl, I'm coming to you because this is 86 individuals have been charged with defrauding Medicaid and the federal child nutrition program in Minnesota. So feeding kids. These people were accused of doing all kinds of things, siphoning this money to all kinds of different places. Kim Strassel writes over at the Wall Street Journal. She says the system itself, the government machine, is broken. It's heaving duplicative federal state programs, awash in forms and bureaucracies, and ancient mainframes has already suffered Soviet-style collapse. This system serves more as a cash machine for criminals than a safety net for the needy. How did we get here? Can we turn it around?
Well, we better, because this Feeding the Nation scandal, that was the name of the nonprofit that siphoned off perhaps as much as $1 billion, is emblematic of what we did. We threw money at COVID in such a way that a bunch of crooks could steal $1 billion in Minnesota, and ungodly amounts of money from the programs that we set up to support small businesses. I had a personal involvement with this. I got a letter saying you need to repay your $20,000 loan made to Rove and Company. Never took the money out. Somebody had gone in, and this is rife. You talk to the federal investigators who are looking into these programs, and God knows how much money was stolen. And we had people in this state, California, in state prisons getting money during the pandemic program, and we haven't recovered it. So it's a lesson about big government. When it starts handing out money, it starts doing it recklessly.
Yeah, and another piece over the Wall Street Journal said it's true that Minnesota's generous welfare state has become a magnet for Somali immigrants. It says the problem isn't the migration issue, but that's part of the conversation. But Jen, the immigration issue is part of the national defense conversation here.
Well, it's very interesting. On the eve of the forum, the National Security Strategy was released at 10 p.m. at night by the White House, and a principal change in that strategy from 8 years ago was a shift from great power competition and discussions of China and Russia as revisionist powers. It is now a shift to the Western Hemisphere. The focus is on migration. There are swipes taken at the Europeans for that they will face civilizational decline if they don't focus on migration. So a really interesting new national security strategy that's going to change a lot of how the Pentagon and others do things.
Yeah, it gives us the overview of where this administration is headed. Panel, thank you very much.